We're gonna start off with Mortal Kombat 11 talk, and I've invited Ketchup and Mustard. Actually, big fans of their content, and the reason I invited them is because they're really in the entire world of Mortal Kombat. I mean, from the lore side all the way to the tournament side to just everything. And I think they're one of the best ambassadors for actually not just Mortal Kombat, but for NetherRealm. So I was like, you know what? I had to do this. I had to get these guys on. And then now keep in mind, there's nothing confirmed for Mortal Kombat 11. There hasn't been any official announcements. The closest thing that we got was a interview from Ed. And he says, if you know our timeline and the way we work, then you know what should be coming next. And that was the closest to a confirmation to Mortal Kombat 11. But NetherRealm for many years has been with this timeline of games, and it's usually around every 2.5 to 3 years. Like it's been like clockwork. You know, at every other E3, they showcase a new Mortal Kombat or Injustice game. So it's pretty safe to assume, but keep in mind we don't know any inside info. We know people from NetherRealm, but they run a tight ship when it comes to links. So I invited Ketchup and Mustard with me today.
How's it going, man?
Hey,
well,
hey.
I think actually, thank you very much for the intro, man. I think you flatter us very much. We've been big fans of your content before MK9, funnily enough.
Nice.
I remember watching, you know, when they announced that Mortal Kombat Rebirth trailer?
Yeah.
Pitch thing, and you made that video talking about why it's going to be so kick-ass. I remember watching that video. I'm like, man, this guy's sick. And then, yeah, obviously, through MK9, obviously, I think we got to watch your content a bit behind the scenes. But I think that's the thing about Mortal Kombat for Jake and I, really, is the fact that beyond tournaments and stuff, fundamentally, we're still like everyone else. You know, we've always been massive fans of Mortal Kombat, and it is and always will be our favorite franchise.
Yeah.
Going through all the games and all the franchises, you know, films, movies, comics, whatever, we've seen it. Good stuff.
Indeed, indeed.
I think just to get it out of the way early, I assume, considering this is, I'm assuming you want this to be more of like a conversation, right?
Yeah, it's a conversation. We're going to chat, go back and forth and so forth.
So we're different people, but our opinions are sometimes painfully alike. You might get quite a fair amount of us kind of just parroting each other's answers, but as long as you're okay with that.
Oh, no, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely fine. But yeah, so to mirror what Ryan said, thanks very much for having us on. I'm looking forward to this. It should be nice and enjoyable. I mean, especially with E3 being so close, right? We don't know what's going to be announced. You know, for all we know, maybe we'll hear nothing. But on the assumption that we do hear about a new Mortal Kombat, and it is MK11, I'm sure together we've all got a ton of opinions and stuff that we would like to see, as well as some other cool little bits and pieces.
Exactly, and I think we're going to be talking, before we even kind of think about starting to go to MK11, we kind of want to start talking about the old games and then maybe things that we'd like to carry over, because if you look at the history, especially with, you know, MK, it borrows a lot and it grows from every previous iteration of Mortal Kombat. It's like, all right, this worked, but this didn't work, so let's take that out and kind of, and they've been doing it, you know, with MK9, Injustice 1, you know, to MKX, to Injustice 2. So they've been definitely growing, and you can see how they've kind of borrowed and took the bits of best games. So we're going to, I guess, talk about some of the games, you know, some of the features from some of the old Mortal Kombats that we liked, or the old Injustices that we liked, that kind of hope they get carried on to the next iteration.
So I think, first of all,
yeah.
In my opinion, if we look at the original timeline from Mortal Kombat and how obviously the events of Armageddon kind of signified the end of the Midway saga, I suppose, of Mortal Kombat, and then when Mortal Kombat was reborn with MK9, it was going back in time and redoing Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, all in one game. And then of course we kind of see elements of MK4 and MKX to kind of start things off, where we see Quan Chi and Shinnok kind of pairing up and going together. And then the franchise goes into its own thing. I feel like if there is one game where we might be likely to see the 3D era come into its like modern, you know, reimagining, I guess, I do actually think that MK11 or whatever next Mortal Kombat is on the way, I think this is the time we're going to start to see like the 3D timeline. Like I really think we're going to see some of the 3D characters reimagined, and even then certain gameplay elements, like one of those things about, you know, we always talk about this, Mustard and I, about how you could swap between fighting styles
in
the 3D era. What if, you know, in the next Mortal Kombat, variation system makes a return, but instead of it being fighting styles, you can switch between variations in between rounds or something. It would kind of lend itself to the modern mechanics of the variation system, and also combine it with the old mechanics of being able to essentially swap your fighting style or how you wanted to play characters. That's one thing personally I would very much like to see, is that interchangeability in between rounds.
No, yeah, I mean, that's cool. I was kind of thinking about that last night too. Especially, I'm like, I wonder if maybe those variations would include weapons. You know, like if they did that in the next, because that's something they had variations, but they were kind of similar but different. But like, imagine to the point where if they included weapons, because I think ever since 4 and on, there's always kind of been weapons in MK, and it's always been kind of hit or miss, but. That's something like that's a kind of a good question. Like, could that work? Could that possibly be a thing for the next one?
I think fundamentally that is the biggest question, though, is would it work in terms of like game mechanics? Because I think, I mean, obviously the three of us here have a lot of certain element of nostalgia to the 3D Mortal Kombat. You know, I know there's definitely mixed opinions on how they were. I know competitively they weren't fantastic, but they weren't built for that, right? They were just built to exist as fun Mortal Kombat games, and that's all we wanted out of them when we were younger, and that's exactly what we got. If you're talking about like old, or I suppose more aged mechanics that were in the older Mortal Kombats that might come back, I think, you know, again, kind of going on what Ketchup said, it really is this kind of perhaps interchangeable fighting styles. Because if you really think about it, argue that the original swapping fighting styles in between the match, kind of, you know, fluidly, could be a little bit like variations altogether. You had your universal special moves and stuff, but your actual normals and stuff will change depending on which one you're in. At the same time, I think one thing that has always set MK apart from the competition in terms of like the modern fighting game crowd is its accessibility. And I'm curious as to whether we'll actually see interchangeable variations match, because that's complicated. Now that's going to get into realms of being very, relatively difficult, even at like an early, you know, I suppose lower level of gameplay where people that are very casual are going to kind of just, you know, be looking to have some fun and hit some buttons. It makes you wonder if almost being able to swap variations and have different stances and weapon modes and all that kind of stuff might even be a little bit too complicated for what they're going for. But I guess it would all depend on how they would implement something like that.
Yeah, and I think time will tell. And I think if they want to get to a bigger roster, they might have to kind of tone down the variations. I think, I mean, because before with 3, you know, you essentially have 3 characters per character. So in a game where there's 30 characters, that's about 90 characters right there. I mean,
didn't MKX literally end at almost like 100 playable different things, right? And when you added all the DLC characters, and obviously Triborg had 4, which was a bit of a spanner in the works. Yeah, that was a lot of potential playable characters if you look at it separately. Yeah,
and if you remember Armageddon, it's like, okay, we have every single Mortal Kombat character instead of 3. You know, people are gonna have 2 now. So, I mean, I would be okay if they kind of moved down to maybe just a 2 variation system. You know, something to deal with more of a rush down, something to deal with more of a spacing and zoning aspect. You know, and I think, you know, because 3 might have been a little too much, and because sometimes there was always a variation system that always kind of got pushed aside.
I agree with that for sure. The thing about Mortal Kombat X, variations were by a significant margin my favorite thing about that game, because if you're a lab monster and you like to sit in training and you want to just learn something new that not everyone is actually playing, I feel like for the entirety of year number 1 in Mortal Kombat X, there were so many variations that you could explore that no one was playing.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, that is the fact that no one was playing them. There are a lot of variations in the game that were either irrelevant competitively, as in there was no point picking them over another one that the character had, or they just weren't very good and therefore weren't picked. So whilst I think the creativity you could have with the variations was good, there were a lot of dud variations that were pointless, especially by the end of the game.
Yeah. Even
if characters stand alone had, you know, I feel like I will always feel like the end of Mortal Kombat X was actually the most balanced it had ever been, for sure. There were still variations that were irrelevant. So I definitely agree with you there, that I think having less variations, you know, going from like 2 instead of 3 would actually work better, especially if they were to go with a bigger roster. On the subject of roster, very much hope to see a nice, fruitful, big roster, because I think I want to see, personally, I want to see some of these 3D characters reimagined and fleshed out. You know, like I want to see like Ashura redesigned. I want to see Havoc. I want to see Chameleon. I want to see Noob Saibot come back. I want to see these really obscure characters like Hotaru. You know, like these really unique characters that had potential, and you could kind of see where they were trying to go with these characters. But I think with modern technology and basically I think the creative vision that they have after all the experience they've had making these games, I think these old characters that may have been a little bit forgettable, I guess, could actually be really interesting in, you know, 2019 or whatever.
No, that's super fantastic. I've been thinking about that. I mean, it's especially with now how it's grown so much, and it's like I definitely like I have to admit something pretty embarrassing, but when I mean I think it was when Su Hao first came out, I was actually kind of excited. I was like, yo, because I know, but I was a big Street Fighter player and I loved to play Zangief, so I didn't know what he played like, but I'm like, hey, look, you know, Mortal Kombat could get its first true grappler, and I was excited to maybe have like a big brick house grappling character. But
God, if there's gonna be a straight up grappler, anyone but Su Hao.
Yeah, I know.
Didn't he have a sumo variant?
Yeah, and he walked like a baby. But like, but then I was excited, but then I saw him and I'm like, oh man. But like because that's would make me happy if we had someone like Bane. Like it doesn't have to be Su Hao, but I was only excited because I just wanted to have a grappler character in a Mortal Kombat. I've always thought that like they were kind of missing that, so that's why I was kind of excited when he first came out, and then he played him and I wasn't so excited. But
I just don't know if grapplers like as an archetype fits the way Mortal Kombat, I mean, even MK9, MKX, both of these games just don't really fit the way you would assume a traditional grappler would play.
Correct.
They had what you'd expect, right? You know, command grabs, you could tick into them. Even MKX, right? They changed it so if you spent a bar, you could literally combo into them from standing, which is a big change, but it just didn't really seem to make a difference. It depends on what you want from a grappler, because if you just want someone that has command grabs, that exists. You know, that existed for a while. MKX had plenty of that, but it depends. I think as long as characters have the same amount of health, it's kind of hard for that archetype to really fit in a traditional sense. Whenever characters sharing the same amount of health bar, right? When, you know, Kotal Khan has got insane range and runs in super fast, we'd expect that if someone's like a grappler, maybe they'd move slower but have more health to make up for it. I just don't know if that fits Mortal Kombat. Really.
No, that's true. I mean, but I think, like, you know, when you have someone like Biohazard rocking Ferrator or Ferrator, and then in Injustice, Bane. And I think, to me, it was really exciting to see Bane played. I mean, he's like, you know, traditional grappler. And I think Bane was kind of outclassed in, you know, he had to work his butt off in Injustice because the stages were so big, but it was a pleasure to see like Bane and Ferrator in these games. You know, just characters that want to be next to you at all times, and amazing setups and tricks. And it was a pleasure just watching those characters at a high level. So that's why I was hoping.
Sorry, in my opinion, I think there's a reason that I think the three most recognizable grapple characters in NRS, I think, were Grundy from Injustice 1, Bane from Injustice 2, and Ferrator. Particularly, I think, in Ruthless, where they got Pain and Gain.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason they're kind of like the three most significant grapplers, because their grabs did damage.
Yeah.
Like Grundy's trait grab did like 30-35%. Bane, his grabs were really popular because obviously you would have Venom stacks, so it would be the armored grabs that do huge damage. And then, of course, when Ferrator had the Pain and Gain stacks, those command grabs that they had would be doing like, you know, 30-35% chunks as well. So I think damage plays a huge part in what makes grapplers satisfying.
Exactly. That's why, you know,
command grabs, they have a week, they're obviously underwhelming, but if they hurt, then that character becomes very, very hard hitting and super satisfying.
I mean, Sun God, right? When you had
when
you had Sun God.
Oh my gosh.
You know, he also has the opportunity to, every time he hits you with it, he becomes more powerful. He can cash out and get health back, or he can keep it for damage. Like, characters that when they land grabs are all of a sudden way harder to deal with. I think that's definitely another way of making grapplers work.
Yeah, no, and I'd definitely love to see more type of grapplers, and I think in MK, and I think they could benefit a little bit more from that, from MK, because especially with the run button and the way that MK's always kind of been really about, you know, kind of rushing in, and it's not so much zone based, but there are some fantastic zoners as well. But you know, I think with a lot of characters are kind of meant to kind of go around that. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about the difference between MK9 and MKX, because I did get a question, because you know, when we're talking about MK9, it was a lot about spacing and footsies, and I mean for me, I think MK9 is my favorite of all time. Like, just like if I had a favorite just Mortal Kombat 2, because it really got me into this world, but like my favorite just to play is MK9, because it just felt good, like comfortable to me, and I think, let's see, I mean, because like it was about like more of the footsies, it wasn't so much about 50-50 and everything like that, but aside from like the most broken characters in the game, but I just really get a lot of joy from it. So if you want to talk about maybe because people are thinking, well, you know, would it be back to 50-50s? Would it be back to maybe more of a footsie and spacing and punishing game? Like, so
I think we have to look at what made, when you look at, I think, how the game is played, you look at what the top tier characters are and why they are the way they are. Mm-hmm. So first of all, MK9 definitely not a 50-50 game. It was about extreme pressure more than anything else. It was either pressure or it was damage. They were the two things that would define characters. So I think it's actually quite funny how absolute most traditional, one of the only characters in the game that had a 50-50 vortex was Scorpion. Yeah. And because his 50-50 vortex was really unsafe in a game where Cyrax damage existed, he was actually really low tier. Scorpion was like low mid. And he was the most 50-50 heavy character if you played him that way. The best characters in the game were incredibly hard to deal with because they were either insanely defensive or insanely rushdown heavy. I want to say, actually, you know, shout-outs to Rio for that MK9 video talking about Sonya and really showing just why she was so good. She was one of many examples of insane rushdown. And I think Cabal, Johnny Cage, Sonya, and Kung Lao as well, very, very, very rushdown heavy characters that were hard to deal with. You had to make these hard reads on how to defend against them. Or on the flip side, these hyper defensive characters like Freddy Krueger and Kenshi, which were the two highest tier defensive characters.
Yeah, Kenshi is a character that is often forgotten about when kind of retrospecting on what MK9 was like. You know, Kenshi was a unique specimen, but insanely powerful. Like,
there's a reason.
Incredibly powerful.
There's a reason the MK9 variation of Kenshi and MKX is jokingly called Balance.
But I think, again, you know, when you're looking back at what made characters good in MK9, you know, it really is, like Ketchup said, it's damage or pressure or a mix of the two. Because you look at the best characters and, you know, they have an overwhelming amount of one or the other. I think, typically speaking, the general opinion is MK9 was more about footsies because universally, that was how people tended to play, right? You know, you'd move with dash blocking as opposed to running or run cancelling with an MKX. Jump-ins were like universal jump-in punches, so anti-airing was easier because every character had the same jump-in punch, had the same jump-in kick, so it was like had one universal anti-air timing for every jump-in punch in the game, and that is why that kind of stuff was more consistent. People saying it was footsie-based, neutral-based, because you could anti-air reliably when people left the ground, because a lot of characters had very, very strong standing anti-airs with normals. And because of the fact that all the jump-in punches were the same, made it quite easy to kind of consistently anti-air everyone. Then you look at things like Mortal Kombat X, and characters have specific jump-ins, like, you know, pre-patch Kung Lao jump 2, Cole Khan jump 1. Yeah, I'm sure there's an absolute ton of that. Forgetting about, you know, stuff like that. Characters that had a unique jump-in. And then obviously MKX was considered to be very 50-50 based because that's just how a lot of the characters universally played. But that's not to say that MK9 didn't have its share of it. You know, Sonya was a 50-50 every single time you blocked the military stance. Scorpion had elements of it, but it just wasn't quite as fully dished out. But at the same time, you have to look, you know, what was more popular. MK9 sold really well, so did MKX. MKX did really well on Twitch for viewership, competitively, casually. Twitch wasn't as big of a thing back in MK9 days, so can we even make that comparison? I guess it all comes down to really what the guys and the design team in NetherRealm have in mind. I personally wouldn't mind either, so long as the game is fun, as long as it feels like Mortal Kombat, it's nice and fast. Generally it ticks all the MK boxes. I'm happy to try it.
Nice. And then what were your thoughts on MKX's being pretty 50-50 heavy, like to the point where there was some, like I think there were some people that even were above 50-50.
So I think that I'm a fan of, as time went on, NetherRealm learned a lot about what the community did and didn't like, with the exception of Alien. I think Alien was one of those really weird cases where, obviously not to discredit NetherRealm by any degree, but I think the community was quite, I guess, concerned at the beginning when, at the time, the community had dictated that they didn't like 50-50s, they didn't like really good armor, and they were two things that people didn't like at all. And then when Alien came out, Alien being the perfect organism, had some of the best 50-50s and some of the best armor, and people were like, come on, you give us this character now, oh my god. But in all seriousness, I love the fact that NetherRealm started to make one of the two attack directions more reactable. So one of the changes we saw by the end of the game was unreactable 50-50s were, of course, a way for newer players to open up a really good player. If you just know how to put them in that situation, making them guess a 50-50, it kind of, I think, lowers the bridge in between bad player and really, really good player, because as long as you know how to do overhead or low, you could technically open up anybody, even if they're Sonic Fox, right? But the second you introduce one of the attack directions being slower, which is what we saw by the end of the game, they would make, historically, I think it was the overhead option they would make a little bit slower and more reactable. They would slow those normals down. They did it for Sonya, they did it for Triborg, they did it for Ermac, and that's just off the top of my head. You would obviously block low, and when you would see the overhead portion, you'd actually start to fuzzy that. You would block on reaction. So a lot of these 50-50s became reactable in high level by the end of the game, which would increase that skill ceiling, where if you were going to be a top player, you had to have those reactions. Otherwise, you were going to still get hit by what was a 50-50, but if you were better than the rest, you would actually eliminate the mix-up, could react to those options. And I'm really happy that NetherRealm did that by the end of the game. And to be honest with you, I actually think that's going to be more of a factor in whatever Mortal Kombat is next. I do not think there will be as many 50-50s. I think there will be overheads and lows, but I think they will be more reactable, personally.
Yeah. I actually don't mind unseeable 50-50s within certain boundaries. What I think was the biggest problem that a lot of the MK characters had in terms of how kind of bloated they were, really, in terms of how strong they ended up being, was not only did they have these unseeable 50-50s between overhead and low, most of them were unreactable until they slowed them down much later in the game's life. It was that on top of that, they had amazing kits. They had amazing utility on top of that. It was, these characters had 50-50s. They also had incredibly long range. They had great pokes. They had nice fast normals. They had, great armored options. They had great wake up, moves and stuff like that. They had a lot of safety. It was,
they ran at the speed of light.
Yeah, I think that was one of the worst things, was how so many characters had 50-50s but were safe when doing so. Look back to the way Quan Chi was for most of the game's life. He could do one of two, like a fast overhead, fast low, and turn it into a plus special move. And he wasn't alone in being able to do that.
I liked that. I liked that while I was doing that, you were also taking chip death and dying anyway.
Yeah.
But, in all seriousness, I think that was the biggest problem. It wasn't the fact that they had these 50-50s and these vortexes and these crazy traditional mix-ups, because the only 50-50s aren't overhead or low. That's a very broad term. Anything that has a mix-up between one or the other, regardless of what those options are, is a 50-50 as long as it's a two-way thing. But because it was so traditional and so blatant, unseeable overhead, unseeable low, it was that they had these moves on top of an incredible kit otherwise as well. I think so long as characters have these crazy unseeable mix-ups, they need massive downsides to make up for it.
Yeah.
In terms of range, worse jumping, worse mobility, worse defense. Like, if everyone had Vanilla Quan's defense as well as stubbier 50-50s or worse normals, it wouldn't have been as bad. But the problem is, a lot of the characters had this crazy offense, but also strong defensive tools to make up for it as well, on top of a lot of other things.
No, yeah, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying with the variation system when they discovered that other Quan Chi that no one was really using, and then he became like a literal monster. I forget the variation is the one where he was casting the
Sorcerer.
Sorcerer, yeah, and like that one was kind of slept on, and then all of a sudden Sorcerer showed up, and it was a nightmare. It was like, oh, I'm dead now. I'm trapped. Because he would just get himself in a nice spot, be fully armored, and like it was impressive, and that's what it goes back to saying, like people discovering those hidden systems. Like I remember every once in a while you never see her, but a Thorough Melina, and there was a couple of people on the scene that just started coming up with a Thorough Melina, and you're like, holy cow! Because for a while everyone's like, oh, that's a throwaway one, and then you had a couple of the tournament players. I remember Grim Magician or Grim Robert. He was, doing crazy amounts of pressure with a system that nobody thought that was viable. But man,
I think it goes. Oh, sorry.
No, but that discovery of that Quan Chi was pretty amazing, and it was like to the point where like, holy cow, we have to change this immediately.
I was in a fortunate situation with that. In that, basically, the reason I played Sorcerer and I think unlocked so much of that variation's potential was because I wasn't a competitor. I was a commentator first.
Oh, okay.
So basically, while everyone else was playing Summoner, because it was the easier variation to play with very rewarding zoning, very rewarding mix-ups, hard to blockables, of course, and stuff like that. Everyone was kind of flocking to that variation because the tournament started immediately. The Pro League kicked off straight away. All of the offline stuff was happening as well, and players understandably felt like they had to go with a variation that was easier to pick up and play because the tournaments are going on right now. I don't have time to learn this complicated variation. Whereas on my side, because I wasn't allowed to enter like most of the tournaments, I was able to essentially just sit there and grind it and just play it and learn it, knowing there was no expectation of me to play or place in tournament because I'm not a tournament player. I wasn't a tournament player really back then. I was a commentator first. Learning Sorcerer just came from having the, I think, freedom to learn it. And I'm not pressured to learn something easier and faster because I'm not entering tournaments. That's really where it came from. Quan Chi was an interesting case in that all three of his variations were top tier.
Yeah.
Even Warlock was super, super good. The second they gave him that 13-frame armored scoop that did massive damage, even Warlock was sick. That's why Quan Chi, I think, was back then by far a top 3 character. Because you could pick any of his variations, and they were all top tier, by far. But Warlock was just the least rewarding, I think. But they were all sick, and that's why I love the variations. He particularly made the variation system really fun and rewarding.
Nice, nice. All right. Now I'm going to go kind of into some of a little bit of the questions while during that I got on Twitter, and know how these games are borrowing off each other. Do you think you could possibly see the input system or thoughts if not the input, the gear system? Would you thoughts on if it was to make it over to MK?
So when it comes to gear, I'm definitely like as a fan of the game and as a fan of competitive play, I definitely am a little bit disappointed in how it ended up.
Yeah,
the gear system was a great idea. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we're like, over a year into Injustice 2 by now, and I couldn't even tell you what all the gear moves are for my character. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think generally speaking, it's a bit too forgettable, and I know that's because we play on competitive mode, we watch tournaments all the time where these moves aren't allowed. But I think what really held it back was the fact that there was no way to include gear moves without also including the stats, and the gear stats are what I think made the biggest impact in the matches. Is people all of a sudden being insanely hard to defeat, them doing way too much damage, all that kind of crazy stuff, right? I think generally that is what made the gear system a little bit less impressive as a fan of competitive gameplay. Because if we could just allow the moves but still disable the numbers, right, the actual stat differences they enabled, it would have been a lot easier to implement them and see some cool stuff, you know, do online tournaments with them, you know, do King of the Hills and allow the moves, but just leave the numbers out of it. But because there was no way of separating them, it was harder to really implement them and actually enjoy them, I think, as a fan of the other side of the gameplay. I think I wouldn't mind them coming back if they are a little bit different execution. I just don't know if I really like the whole individual numbers to, you know, health amounts, attack damage and stuff, because I feel like that made too much of a difference for gear and didn't make enough of a difference in competitive. I think that kind of needs to be a little bit reimagined if gear is to work in another game.
I think off the back of that, I would like gear to return in the form of customization. I would absolutely love to be able to customize characters a little bit in the next Mortal Kombat for sure. I'm just a sucker for customization in any game, particularly obviously the amount of Tekken and stuff that I play. And obviously Soul Calibur, I have really fond memories of Soul Calibur just making really sick costumes for my favorite character as well. You get great satisfaction from that, and it lets you kind of put a stamp of, I think, individuality on your character without having to define a play style. You can just make it look however you want. And I'd love to see that in a Mortal Kombat, because I love the customization in any fighting games.
Yeah.
So by far, I'd like to see that. But off the back of what Jake just said, I actually agree. I liked the gear system and I loved what it did for the game, but I wasn't a fan of how impactful the stats were. I think if there was a custom move option where you could almost, like, you know, switch out special attacks, that opens up massive opportunities for like making content and stuff. You know, you could have tournaments with custom moves enabled, you know, where the loadout wasn't stat based. The loadout was, I'm going to swap this move with this interesting move that we can't see normally. That would have actually been really interesting, and I think you could have had some really fun like community tournaments with that. Unfortunately, the stats were way too prominent, and I think it really kind of got in the way of that, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%, and that's actually the consensus of everyone from Yo Video Games. Like, man, the gear system is cool, but then now I have to go and earn these moves, and I think it could have been fantastic, especially in Injustice, because there were some moves that were fantastic. I'm like, man, if I had this move for, you know, Sub-Zero, I would be totally able to get away from this zoning and pressure over here, and I think that, like, it just made me sad, because like you said, there was no way to, like, hey, let me put this in a variation. And I think that was something that was lost. But from what I've heard, I guess gear matches were the most popular, because I think through casually, and like sometimes we do forget, but there's a huge silent casual market out there. But I believe that NetherRealm, they're fantastic at, like, all right, okay, here's what we did. Now let's put it back and reimagine it and to make it best for both worlds. Because I'm with you. Customization in a fighting game is my favorite. I love to, like, and I think that's what made me really love Injustice more. It's just because I can really, you know, to take the character I love and, like, you know, I was not so crazy about this, and change it up and personalize it. And it made fun for, you know, seeing all these different characters of, like, different people come up with their different versions of Sub-Zero or Batman.
This way, if I had no choice but to use default Raiden in Injustice 2, there's no way I'd main him.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. I was really excited, but then I'm like, you know, he's showing a little bit too much of the midriff. That's kind of a weird option right there. But, like,
nice chest, Raiden. How do you put it away?
Exactly. That was pretty funny to me. But then, like, I would love that in MK. I'd love to, like, you know, if you had your favorite character and you could kind of, like, you know, I don't like the color scheme, I can get this little color scheme, and it was something that kind of gave a little bit longer life to the game too. I mean, I maybe make it, I'd say, probably a little less grindy, but because it was kind of tough, because, like, and then my biggest problem with the gear system too was the stats attached to the individual armor items, because then that meant you got multiples of said pieces of armor. So instead of, like, maybe if there was only 100 pieces of armor in the game that didn't do any stat buffs, then you can collect them all. But I'm sitting here collecting 10 different shin guards, and most of them they're the exact same, but they have different stat boosts. And I think that's what made getting your favorite gear system in Injustice even more bit of a task. So I'm just hoping that, yeah, I mean, NetherRealm is good at listening and changing. So, yeah.
I mean, just a little bit less scope for disappointment, right? If
Yeah.
there's less options of getting the same piece of gear with different arbitrary numbers attached to them, there's more chance you'll get something else. You know, if all you care about is visuals, or you just want something a little bit more different and interesting, then you have a higher chance to find it. I do wonder how they do things like you said before, the color palette.
Yeah.
Because,
of course.
speaking, I mean, surely you're not going to get like a blue Scorpion or, you know, a red Sub-Zero. You know, I can imagine that if they're doing color palettes, it would have to be within reason.
Yeah.
You look at the characters, and a lot of the time, the color they are in terms of
Of course
is kind of part of what makes their character so identifiable. Because even in Injustice 2, you could tell there were some characters that was a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
The TMNT shaders always being certain amounts of green or that weird grey color they normally are.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Sub-Zero in Injustice 2 is a good point of that. Sub-Zero in Injustice 2 has bright colors of all the male ninjas across Mortal Kombat, but they look cool when he's standing there, but then you play as him and it just doesn't really look right. You know, if you've got like a red Sub-Zero running around, or a yellow one, or a green one, it looks cool when he's standing there, but as soon as he's playing and he is Sub-Zero, it's just a bit of a, you know, kind of just boggles the mind a little bit, because your mind just doesn't put two and two together initially.
No, exactly.
Like Sub-Zero anymore.
Yeah, from like an MK player, it's like it you know, growing up for years and years, it does trick your brain. But I think it was kind of cute because it was just like, well, I can't play Ermac, but, you know, I'll make my Sub-Zero look like Ermac. But, you know, maybe it'll be just maybe changing the lining of the colors, or just kind of like little accents, I believe, in MKX. Or MK11, I should say, if it gets to that level. Yeah, and okay. So gear, but yeah, I mean, I think we're all on the same page of gear, but, and I have a crazy theory that, like, that they're going to go above and beyond in this next game, and I think they're going to, like, give us something like, because if you, for MK9 and MKX, we haven't got any really bonuses like the 3D games in the past before. I mean, granted, some of these extra modes weren't, you know, all, I mean, like, you know, we had Mortal Kombat. I don't think we're getting something like that, but
there is nothing wrong with Mortal Kombat.
No, it was a very unique thing. It's like, hey, here's Mortal Kombat, and guess what? You get a Mario Kart game. You know,
it makes you wonder though, because we know that NetherRealm have never really been shy of making big changes. Like, I think it's quite fitting that we're here now as long-time fans of the franchise, wondering, you know, what features do we want to return? You know, are they going to bring things back and expand them a little bit? For all we know, they're just going to throw a spanner in the works. It's going to be completely different in loads of ways. Like, I would like to see the Crypt come back, because I think the Crypt was one of the best things in terms of replay value in the old MKs, especially because of the contents of the Crypt was so diverse in what you could find, like crazy behind-the-scenes videos about like voice acting, or, you know, history on the martial arts styles they put in the game.
Cooking with Scorpion.
Can't forget Cooking with Scorpion. Funny little bits of art and stuff like that, you know, stick figure storyboarding of fatalities. MK9's Crypt was, I think, a little bit more uninspired, and it turns out the Crypt was cool to have it back, but it was kind of, it seemed like it was very much padded out, you know, with kind of fatality inputs and stuff that you wouldn't really expect to find in the Crypt initially. MKX's Crypt was cool because it was obviously a bit of a first-person kind of exploration. It makes you wonder if, instead of a story mode for MK11, we might, because I know obviously people have been talking about Shaolin Monks. What if the story mode of the next MK is Shaolin Monks 2? And it is in a fighting game that is a fighting game through and through, but has a story mode that is Shaolin Monks 2, where you play as, I don't know, Revenant, Kung Lao, and Liu Kang, who are like trying to break free of the kind of, you know, what would you call it, like demonic possession, or whatever it is that's happened to them. It could be them trying to go back to normal, and then they take down Dark Raiden accordingly. You know, maybe that's the kind of thing we'll see. I mean, how cool would that be? People have been asking for Shaolin Monks 2 for God knows how long, and it's unlikely we'd see it as a standalone thing without being a fighting game, and, you know, maybe that's how they do it.
Yeah, no, and that's something we've talked about. Like, I think, because, like I said, I think we're due for an extra thing, and then, like, being, like, we used to, like, we get all these extra things. I'm gonna say, like, yeah, that's actually a pretty good, like, guess, or to, like, the next big thing. And I'm thinking, maybe what if, like, the stat boost or something like that just work on a certain part of the game, not like the competitive side. So if they did decide to do stat boost, maybe just, oh, you know what, that'll work in this Shaolin type monks story game that we're putting in. Cool. And I'm thinking to make it more like, I think more of an adventure, more of like kind of like you know, like an RPG, but with a fighting thing. And I don't know, if I had to guess, that's one of my crazy things, that there's going to be a big extra mode in this game that they're giving us. Because if we go back to the 3D eras, that's kind of what they all did. So,
I mean, I could honestly say that probably my fondest memories of the 3D era Mortal Kombat weren't actually the fighting. It wasn't actually the 1v1 fighting. It was, you know, Deception story mode. It was Armageddon story mode. It was Shaolin Monks was probably my favorite Mortal Kombat game of that era of Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah,
because it was just so good. It was such a new experience as a Mortal Kombat fan, and
whilst
you know, it was great.
Whilst the 3D games were not competitively very good at all, because they had loads of problems, they had loads of infinites, they had loads of stuff that meant people couldn't really take it hugely seriously, they did an amazing job of just expanding on the mythology.
Yes.
So as a young fan of Mortal Kombat, you could play Deception, and you could literally run around in all the realms, and there was so much hidden stuff. And you could interact with like every Mortal Kombat character ever made for the most part. You know, you would bump into all these characters, learn their backstories, hear them talk to you. You know, you could run around in all of these different worlds. And I really, really think that they did such a big part. They had such a big part in just creating loads of little pieces of lore that in the future games, when you saw them referenced, would actually make you feel really happy and nostalgic, because you remember it from, you know, the conquest modes and stuff.
Yeah.
What if conquest mode comes back and they literally just call it conquest, you know?
And I think that's like actually a good thing. I think conquest mode may turn into the Shaolin monks. That, you know, crazy theory that conquest mode will be kind of like teamed up with, like, kind of combined with Shaolin monks, and you get a way to do story through that. I mean, I know we're going to get a big cinematic story, but I don't know, I have a feeling that they're going to give us an extra item like this that'll get us more deep into the lore of the game. And
it'll be a nice way to break it up, right?
Yeah.
Right now, it's been the kind of same story mode, I suppose, formula for 4 games. And whilst they have been good story modes,
of course,
it would be a nice way of going into like a new generation of Mortal Kombat, a new kind of story mode. You know, I think Shaolin Monks was almost like an extremely polished, optimized version of what MK Conquest modes were building on back in the day. You know, Conquest was a third person perspective. You travel around across all the realms and meet these characters and stuff like that. And it would then, when you had a fight, would go into the 1v1 side-by-side combat. Shaolin Monks was then that same third-person camera, but built with co-op in mind, crazy Easter eggs, exploration, and overworld combat like that. It makes you wonder if that's something they could do nowadays, because I definitely welcome a change in formula, because I do like the story modes. I think MK9 story was great for the time. MKX, again, was strong. I think, you know, it's very subjective as to whether you enjoy the story mode itself for, like,
of course,
the actual lore of the game, but there's no denying that the story mode is a great piece of content as a player of the game. And this would be a great way of kind of taking it to that next level. You know, NetherRealm being able to flex their knowledge a little bit and get some cool single-player stuff in that at this point they are famous for. Single-player content in NetherRealm fighting games is absolutely one of their strongest suits. And this would be an amazing way of kind of building upon that, showing that they are the leaders in that field.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And I think, you know, we can add Injustice to that too, because Injustice, their stories were, you know, top notch, and it got to the point where all these other game companies like, wow, we have to do this, and it, to me, it just really makes me happy to see the evolution of NetherRealm, because, you know, and we've been MK fans for a long time, and a lot of the times we are always kind of at the low end of the totem pole when it came to fighting games. You know, we loved these games and we stood by them, but like everyone's like, haha, that's Mortal Kombat. And now to see Mortal Kombat and Injustice where they are now and so highly rated, it's I think it's fantastic. And you know, like I said, Injustice now, with their story, they had multiple endings or something. I think that's something that we can definitely look forward to maybe in MK11. But
I mean, I guess that is itself another question, right? Is which of the story mode endings are going to stay canon?
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a safe bet that any future Mortal Kombat is going to continue the storyline. But then at the end of the day, not every arcade mode ending will make sense within that context.
Correct.
You look at Triborg's ending where he establishes the Takunin, and that is looking pretty believable because that would make sense.
Yeah.
But then you've got ones like, was it Cassie's ending where she kills Shujinko? Like, are they going to want to make sure that's a thing?
Yeah, I know, huh?
That's the thing. I think it's actually funny you should mention Shujinko, because I personally would really like the next story to focus on. I want the story to actually focus on Onaga and Shujinko.
Okay.
I would really like. I want Onaga to be the next bad guy.
Nice.
Because I think Onaga is one of the most, in my opinion, he's one of the most underrated characters.
Ooh, okay.
Particularly in the 3D games, because I love this idea of we would make all this fuss over like Shinnok and Shao Kahn, and now we're making all of this fuss over like Ko Kahn and Melina and the civil war that was taking place. By the way, I probably think Melina's gonna stay dead. I think.
Ooh.
Sorry, Kenny.
It's all good.
She got kind of like wrecked in the story mode of KX. Like, I actually would not be surprised if she doesn't come back.
No, I'm with you. I kind of feel you on that, but I'm holding out that she'll come back as some kind of DLC. I think she's.
They might do something like that for sure. Yeah, they could do a non-canon DLC character, couldn't they?
Yeah, and I think they probably could bring her back. She is really popular, but the way she got it, I think,
Yeah, she's got eaten from the inside.
Yeah,
mate.
from the inside.
But basically, what I always loved about Onaga's story was we make a big song and dance over how powerful Shinnok, Shao Kahn, Ko Kahn, and Melina were. They're all fighting for like.
Melina was never powerful. She was the worst.
Well, you know what I mean.
She had the least impact. She bit the bullet halfway through the story mode.
But you know what? My point is. She was
dead before Shinnok even turned up.
I know, but hear me out, right? What I'm saying is, like, these are all like really powerful characters fighting for control of Outworld, but Onaga actually is that dude. Onaga will show up and basically be more powerful than any previous ruler outright. I always thought that was a sick storyline for Onaga, but not just that.
Like, you are like little babies. Watch this.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Onaga comes back and he's like the biggest playable character in NRS history. They could make him like this towering character, because I know NRS, their design team is good enough that they could make a giant character work.
Yeah. Hey, no, I feel you on that one, and because that's like, and I guess we can use that to kind of transition, because you want Onaga to come back. Like, we'll talk about characters that we'd like to see make a comeback in the next Mortal Kombat.
I think this is quite an easy one, really, because a lot of the fan favorites that people have been asking for literal years now have been requested for a reason. It'd be great to see Noob Saibot, Fujin finally make his grand appearance, Rain coming back. Because it was almost bittersweet, because there was a PC mod that enabled Baraka, Rain, and Sindel to be playable. We almost got a taste of what they could have been like in the modern Mortal Kombat, and I suppose modern Mortal Kombat MKX onwards. I know they're in MK9, so it's still technically modern.
Oh, man,
seeing them being so close to being finished, but not quite, almost makes you wonder that. I mean, surely there's no reason they wouldn't be in. But I could definitely live with a Mortal Kombat without Baraka, without Sindel. I think Rain is way too interesting of a character to leave out. Noob Saibot, much of the same. But it's like Ryan said earlier on in the day. I would love to see some of these more obscure, stronger characters from other games come back. Like, I would, to this day, love to see Reiko playable.
Yes.
But as like a playable, more balanced version of Shao Kahn. So he attacks with like, all of Shao Kahn's signature attacks, but a bit more sensible, I suppose. So we've got the shoulder charge, the uppercut, the hammer toss. Just make him a bit more sensible, right? So he's a bit more of a traditional playable character. If you always wanted to play Shao Kahn, but a bit better balanced within the game's kind of, meta, Reiko, I would love to see that happen.
I think also, in terms of the MK9 roster, there are three characters I would love to see from that come back. I would love to see Nightwolf return. Nightwolf was one of my favorite characters in MK9, and he's always been a really interesting character to me. I think he'd be sick with modern technology. Rain, of course. It's like you said, Jake, bittersweet. Being able to play Rain on the PC mod of MKX, he is actually really enjoyable. I had a lot of fun playing him and just labbing him and stuff. Even though he's just an MK9 alteration, he was still really fun in MKX to play. I would have, honest to God, paid $5 for Variations Rain if they just finished him off. I would have bought him. 100% I'd have bought him. But also Noob Saibot. I really think it's going to be criminal if we see a new Mortal Kombat that doesn't have Noob Saibot in it. But also, you know, we have like anti-rose tinted goggles because of how broken he was in MK9. But I'd love to see Cabal come back.
Yeah.
He's such a sick character.
No,
but
for sure.
Aside from the MK9 characters, of which it's crazy actually how every MK9 character missing in MKX, I mean, we can all agree for the most part, we'd love to see all of them come back because they're all interesting characters. But
within reason, I think some of them are definitely, like, for example, Baraka. I mean, I think Baraka could be cool with like the new physics, seeing what they could do with him. But generally speaking, like, I think there are definitely characters that I think are a bit more requested than others.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about the 3D era characters. There are a number of 3D era characters that, to be honest, I really don't think need to come back again. Like,
there
Ricardo,
is nothing wrong with Cobra.
as well today. I mean, yeah,
Darius.
I'm happy for him to never come back. Darius. Who else? There's so many. Just, I mean, Lee May would be pretty cool.
Kira was just a female Kano.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I have kind of a cool idea, like how Kira could become come back. Like maybe just retcon a couple of things, because in one of Kano's endings, he had a son, and it would be cool if like the next generation, like next Mortal Kombat, you know, we see maybe Kano's son, and then like Kira could be a daughter, and Kano's son is actually good. And he's got to fight his own sister, and it would kind of add an interesting something. Like, that's just Kenny's crazy story, like, theories. Like, if we brought Kira back, you know, like the next Kano siblings, but one is actually fighting with an Earth realm and being good, and the other one is, you know, being a bad person.
It would certainly be interesting. Personally, one thing I've always really wanted to see is if they were to reimagine one character, I've always wanted to see what they would do with Chameleon.
Chameleon, nice.
Like I don't know what it is about Chameleon that I've found really interesting, but this whole time, it could be male or female, I don't mind. I would just love to see them bring Chameleon back and do something really cool with
Does it make him like his own original character, or almost make him like Mokujin, where he's like a random male?
Well, you know, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But, you know, that would be interesting, but I actually think they could make Chameleon probably even more like invisibility heavy than they would Reptile.
No. Invisibility out fighting.
Well, hey, Reptile. What I'm saying is,
well away.
Reptile always gave me like, no. Best of one Reptile, R.I.P. But like, Reptile always gave me more of the vibe of reptilian warrior.
Yeah.
You know, like this kind of
like.
Well,
that's a good one.
Slightly slippery, but Reptile very much is like actually a warrior style character. But I would think if they were to bring Chameleon back, Chameleon could be like even more of like a slippery and incredibly like acrobatic, very fast.
So what you're saying is you want Reptile but more annoying.
Yeah.
Why would you want that?
Because it'd be cool, man.
Yeah, but you've got to play against it.
Or I could learn it.
Yeah, but then you're just playing the mirror.
Hey man, I was never one to shy away from the mirror.
Oh, dearie me. I'll tell you what I think would be a character that would be amazing in modern MKs if they can get the only move that matters right, Shang Tsung.
Yes.
Shang
Tsung
coming back. I mean, you can't have Shang Tsung without some element of Soul Steal. I don't know if it's like MK9 style where he becomes you, or if they, you know, take imposter mimicry away and he just takes like a single move. But oh my god, can you imagine Shang Tsung and MKX? Like,
I can.
Especially if it's variation based. How much hard work would it have taken to be a Shang Tsung main in a game with 100 playable versions of like characters in total? You'd have to know how to play every variation for every character.
I think if Shang Tsung makes a return, I think him becoming you has to be back.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see him have an imposter thing, because that was always Shinnok's gig, was stealing your moves but keeping the visuals. I actually think NetherRealm, the second I saw Imposter for the first time, I kind of nerded out because I was like, oh my god, it's literally move steal in a variation. That is a very Shinnok way of playing, right? And Shang Tsung, I think, will be very similar. I think if he comes back,
Brutalities too.
Oh my god, if he could become you and do whatever brutality he wanted. Come on now.
Yeah. No, I mean that was something too that I definitely missed, like, and because back in the MK3 days and the classic days, that was a lot of fun, like, and I always loved to use Shang Tsung. Like if I'm playing someone like, oh, this kid's not that good, let me bust out my Shang Tsung, and it was just a blast to be able to.
Oh my god, the combo videos.
Yeah, the combo. Oh my gosh, I still watch some of those.
PS1 version of MK Trilogy where
oh god,
he had his own unique option in the options menu, which was Shang Tsung morphs. You could make it limited, so he would you could transform on the fly, or you could make him transform into anyone. But when he did, it literally
loaded
the game to load load the guy he transformed.
Whenever you'd fight AI Shang Tsung, he'd do it every round.
Yeah, AI Shang Tsung would just be completely thrown off the momentum, trying time a scam by constantly creating a loading screen.
With that in mind, if it paused the game, wouldn't you be able to
DQ? I'm taking the round.
No. Someone jumps in on you. You morph on reaction and gauge how high they are, and pick a character that can anti-air really well.
Oh my god! Imagine that you could just transform into Kung Lao and get Tempest spin.
Oh my gosh!
That would be the sickest. That would be the sickest strat.
Man.
Somehow I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, no. So we talked about some of those, and we're saying earlier on we talked about oh hey, we're gonna get these the return of some of the 3D characters. Which one of you guys like to see? So some of these 3Ds.
If it's being narrowed down to one, it's
well, it doesn't have to be narrowed down. Like some of your favorites that you would hope to get in,
okay.
Yeah.
So I think we've kind of really already touched on this, to be
A
honest.
little bit.
I think it's Havoc, Hotaru would be cool.
Hotaru I want, for sure.
Hotaru would be quite interesting, seeing how they do a vampire in modern games. Like she fights with the sickles, and she's got the ability to regen life from you, but in more ways than just do a special move and get health back. Almost I can imagine Natara being Enchantress but less magic. You know what I mean? That could be quite interesting.
I feel Dairu, if they reimagined him.
I don't know about Dairu. I think there's a reason the names that come to mind are the Havoc is the big one, because who else in the 3D MKs was even close to as crazy and creative as Havoc was?
Imagine the brutalities.
He literally breaks his own legs with a low projectile. Man mutilates himself for the sake of a fireball and nothing else.
No, I was a big fan of Havoc too. I mean, he had a great design. He was kind of you take a little bit of Ermac, but with this undead character. I liked him. I think, well, in this new generation, I think he would go over really well, because they've definitely stepped up their animation and overall from those previous games. So I think if he comes back, I'd be really down for Havoc. And I'm pretty sure they can make those moves look a lot better nowadays. Because I remember, I'm like, man, I like Havoc, but man, this move where he's spinning his torso looks kind of weird. But I really loved his design, and I think some of these characters that kind of were looking janky in the past can really be reimagined. But yeah, we did touch upon that. But I put my vote for Havoc. I'd like to see Kai come back. I want to see him more of his Mortal Kombat 4. Yeah. His Mortal Kombat 4 iteration. I didn't really know what was going on in the later generations. Is it especially with his armor and everything like that? I like when he was more of the White Lotus.
Yeah.
And I think that was a better look. And especially now that Liu Kang is kind of like this Revenant, I think he would fit well into this new generation if they kind of just tone him down like he was in 4.
Was Kai's moveset? He was based around rope, wasn't he?
No, that was Movado. Kai had the air fireballs. Yeah, Kai had the air overhead fireball on the down low launching fireball, and that diagonal up punch. And he had some weird stance where he went on his hands in MK4.
I think if there's any character from MK4 onwards, the one character I'd love to come back is probably Reiko.
Yeah, Reiko.
But I kind of want to get
Fujin. I think, Fujin. There are so many characters we have to choose from, but Fujin as well would be very, very interesting. And my big one of the 3D eras is actually Hotaru, though. I think he's always looked really cool.
Yeah.
And I like his...
I mean, make him fight with the spear at all times, right? Just to do that, it's permanently armed with a weapon we don't see too much. I mean, think MKX, right? Dragon Naginata. I mean, I generally speaking wasn't a big fan of how it panned out, because the Naginata was an awesome weapon within the confines of the variation, but it seemed like it had a lot of weight to it. You know what I mean? It almost seemed like a
it's
an
because
to her, as
it's
opposed
because
to
she never really attacked with the Naginata. It aided her in her acrobatics. The main use you would see of the Naginata was when she would pogo stick off a jump-in or something. So if you had Hotaru, who would actually fight with it, similar to like a Kung Jin, for example, I think actually we would have a
that would be sick.
Character.
I would love Kung Jin to come back, provided his ancestral variation is there. Because ancestral Kung Jin is in my like top 3 favorite variations to play in MKX. It's so enjoyable. Really is well designed in my opinion.
I would, in terms of boss characters, on top of Onaga being the big bad, I would like to see Moloch come back. I always thought Moloch was a really interesting character.
Dramin can stay.
I was about to say, I think Dramin can stay, I don't know, dead and covered in flies or whatever. He was a terrible character, in my opinion. Just not interesting,
it's
even
like all
remotely.
the bits that you don't like about Reptile, enter Dramin.
Dramin just, I don't like him at all. I don't think he's interesting. I don't think he looks good. Play. His most interesting special move was where he just shot a ball of flies at you. It's like, come on, bro.
A ball of flies.
And his fatality sucked. There's no getting around that. If
he hit you really hard with the club.
If you have bad fatalities in an MK game, you are instantly losing cool points.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And that's funny because I remember I liked Movado. I thought he was a great design, and we had a character of Spanish descent, and I'm like, wow, this guy looks really cool. And you know, he's kind of goes a little over with the Black Dragon and Red Dragon clan, and his moveset was awful and his fatalities were awful, and I'm like, there's no saving this guy. Elastic Man.
Man puts on like football boots and stands on you with him.
Yeah.
That's literally
Hey man, have you ever been kicked by someone wearing football shoes? That hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think it would have been a lot easier to digest had the noises of his elastic not been like the sound.
Boing. Boing.
Oh, dear me. Kung Lao was... I mean, it was MK Deadly Alliance, though, right? Deadly Alliance was the first attempt at a game in that style, and some of it was great, and some of it wasn't. You know, Quan Chi neck stretch and drama you could forget about. But then at the same time, you had, like, you know, Kung Lao was really sick, Cyrax Fatality in that game was incredible. Obviously, the Crypt was there, and it did a lot of amazing things, but a couple of dud points, but I think that's kind of to be expected in a game that old, that was that different from everything else.
But, you know, like that goes back to NetherRealm learning from everything and growing from it. And
midway, man.
Yeah, I know, huh? But yeah, I mean,
I'm so happy they landed on their feet.
Yeah.
Versus DC, because it was like, it's hard to believe that if the studio never got bought out by Warner Brothers, everything we've enjoyed for the last 7 years might have never happened. And it's super, almost scary to think about it, right? Because these games have been such a big part of our lives for the last, I mean, literally 2011 to now. It's been like a massive part of our lives, and it might have never happened had they never been picked up by Warner Brothers.
Had that never happened, would be out of a job right now, for sure. Like, for sure. Dead serious too.
For sure, yeah, man. But it's definitely, I mean, I think it was like kind of a no-brainer. But like, yeah, I remember they bought like, yeah, we'll buy Midway, but all they took was pretty much Mortal Kombat, and it's just led them to so much success. And that's just a good thing too, by Warner Brothers saying, you know what, we believe in you guys, and putting a lot of money behind it too, which is another fantastic thing.
I mean, you know, with Ryan and I are incredibly fortunate enough that with you know, we were able to do a NetherRealm studio tour.
Yeah, nice.
You know, Rigo met us in the lobby, and Warner were able to make it work, and NetherRealm were happy to have us to, you know, just basically visit the studio and see how it works. And it's crazy seeing all these different departments and all this like history there, and these guys have been working on this franchise for so long, and they have so much pride in what they've achieved, but rightfully so, and it doesn't stop. It's not like they've just done all these amazing things and are content just sitting back and, you know, churning it out every 2 years. They're actively, constantly trying to improve.
Oh yeah.
It goes from game to game, and it's I honestly feel like we're in such a great situation with, you know, the community of this game that we are rewarded with these. I mean, I'm not just saying this like, you know, I know people can be like, oh, you know, shilling the game. Genuinely high quality products every couple of years. And
not that many people are going to refute you on that.
Situation for that.
Yeah, no.
But that's what I mean, right? Like, people can call me a shit all they want. I really don't mind. Like, these are incredible games, and I'm really happy that we get to experience them when we do, because we're yet to be disappointed. In terms of like the game, what it has in it, how fun it is to play, and how, I mean, when was the last time we were disappointed by a game release?
Yeah.
From 2011 to now, have we ever been disappointed when a game came out?
No.
I don't think so.
Play through the story mode, or all the like the plethora of content. I think above all else, competitively it might be a different story depending on what kind of characters you play and whether your favorite character made the cut. But
I mean,
fundamentally,
different story. I mean, like, just the game by its individual merits, right? Competitively is always subjective based on what kind of player you are, how you want to play the game, what you want from it as a competitive title. But in terms of the game just being worth it and being good, like, it's consistently not disappointing.
Yeah. Now, how much would you like a tag mode in MK11?
Well, I think if the game is going to have tag, I would like the whole game to be built around it.
See, yeah, there you go.
Personally, I think there are enough tag games out right now. I don't think Mortal Kombat needs to join that roster just yet. Maybe the next one, maybe the next one. MK9 had tag. It was fun to play, but very, very, very broken.
Super broken.
It wasn't played competitively because it was so busted. Combinations were just insanity, so many infinites and stuff like that. I would definitely never say no to a tag mode. I think actually you and I, Jake, in particular, I think would have quite a lot of fun with that if you could play online together.
Oof.
Absolutely. But I kind of, like you said, I think there's a bit too many tag games going on right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got Marvel Infinite, Dragon Ball Fighters, BlazBlue tags coming out soon. I don't know if MK tag is really what we need right now in terms of the player base, and I wouldn't mind, like, I wouldn't say no to a mode being enabled in the game, but it depends how much time they're going to put into it, because I would never say no to the opportunity to casually just play some 2v2, chill out with friends, or make some funny videos around it. But strictly speaking, I wouldn't mind if the game was primarily by itself, like strictly 1v1, as is traditional. I mean, I've always liked the idea of there existing a fighting game that is 2v2 in sense of like physically 2-player versus 2-player, almost the way you could do in a Street Fighter Cross Tekken or Tekken Tag 2, where you could have 2 people playing one team as 2 players versus another 2 players. But I think that might be, a little bit too wishful thinking, because that would be a risk and a half, especially nowadays.
For sure. And I think, I mean, you're kind of right, because, back in E3, a couple of E3s, we'd go back there, and I think it was on MKX, we went to Ed, we were like, yo, man, what's the chances of tag making it into MKX? And this was, before it came out. He's like, I don't know. I mean, and I think they do things a lot by the statistics, because they're like, we'd like to, but we looked at the numbers and tag wasn't getting played as much, and then like we had to dedicate a lot of time to making it. So, but I think it would be a mode, like you said, I mean, it would literally have to be all or none, because they have to put a lot of focus, and especially in a tag game, it changes the game dramatically. But I do believe it's a lot of fun. It's a great mode, and I think MK11 could use fun, crazy modes. Maybe these modes won't be like balanced, but it could be, like you said, like a fun mode for you and your brother, like, hey, we're doing 2v2, so come fight me and my bro, and we're gonna go take on all challengers. And I think maybe if they add some kind of, because it's funny, there's all these modes, there's like modes in MKX that we never really play, and that's like the slot machine mode, where you get like all this kind of crazy bonus stuff. But
yeah, I think this is a combination of what we've been talking about, really. Like, I think we could definitely use a new mode to kind of mix things up a little bit. I kind of think the novelty of tag combat and test your luck has worn off somewhat.
Yeah.
It's fun to mess around, but I mean, when was the last time any one of us used custom combat for anything else than brutality combat or infinite super meter or stuff, just to like theory craft some stuff? I mean, I think it's just generally not the same levels of enjoyable to players like us that have been around for a while. I've no doubt there's probably still a bunch of casual players that will still load up some custom combat when they're a bit drunk, and will
it's a nice fun party game.
Can do some stuff. But I kind of feel like we could use something a bit different with a bit more structure. I think tag could be that mode, but like you said, right? If Ed himself is the guy that's saying it takes a lot of time to invest into, people didn't really play it that much, like, I wouldn't hold my breath and see it coming back anytime soon. Maybe like Ryan said, right? Maybe in a few years.
Yeah, yeah, I super agree.
A number of years by now, probably.
How about friendships? Would you like to see those return?
Oh, okay, friendships coming back, I can 100% get behind.
Yeah.
I think in MK3, as far as I'm aware, friendships and babalities had the same requirements.
Yeah.
If you had the choice, why would you ever not do the friendship? The friendship is funnier. The friendship is, I mean, that's it. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and especially
babalities and MK9, where they like mixed them together, were so good.
Yeah. And I'd totally love for them to come back because it was so good. Like sometimes you get a trolly guy who's trolling you, and I'm like, okay. And then you pick your main, and you go in there, and you don't hold block, and then you babality him, and it was awesome. And in MK9,
I mean,
it was
easy as a Sarex play. You just had to do one combo. Like,
there you go.
Like, yo, you didn't need to.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember because, like, I know Ed would, he'd talk in interviews like, oh, we want to make this a little more serious. We want to make it kind of a darker tone. So, and I think that's why they kind of were left out of MKX. But it's such a legacy thing that I really would love to see that return in the game. You got to have a little break in it. And, and nowadays, where they added that achievement where you have to duck 26 times and then do a fatality. I'm like, come on, there's jokey stuff in there. You gotta throw the babalities in back. Yeah, and let's see. On the note of babalities, I mean brutalities. You guys down for them to come back?
I think brutalities are a must. I was actually hoping to talk about this a bit, and I think I was going to tweet about this earlier. And I still might, just to gauge and see what people think. But I think one of the most entertaining parts of MKX, competitively, right?
Yeah.
Watching in tournaments, watching people play it online, highlights for YouTube, anything, right? Is when someone had like a custom combo that would involve the meter burn throw and like a brutality.
Yeah.
When you could like do a really sick combo on someone, it does enough damage, they're dead and they're still stuck in whatever it is you're doing to them. You go for a meter burn grab, you leave them standing, you do something wild, and you end in something that's a brutality. Every character, for the most part, could do stuff like that. Oh my god, was it hype when you saw it? Because you're never ready for it, but as soon as you see that brutality, it's like, okay, instantly everyone recognizes. And there are still brutalities in MKX to this day that people haven't found.
Apparently.
Yeah. Because the thing about that is, I think we can all say as competitive players, and I know there's going to be people, wanting to crucify me for this, but fatalities get a little bit dull when you've seen them 1,000 times because you play the game every day and you're a competitor, right? So if every character has 2 fatalities, you can only really do fatalities every, enough times before it gets kind of dull because it's the same animation every single time. And if you're playing casuals, you don't really want to do that every time because we want to just move on and get into the next match and stuff. You'll do fatalities in tournament, at the end of a set or something. Yeah, that's cool. But brutalities, on the other hand, gave you so much freedom to get the same level of satisfaction and in some ways more satisfaction. Because if you were a sick player and you had these awesome combos that you could make, you still got, the violence and the hype levels of a fatality, but you were able to work it into a really fun combo or a really fun setup.
Also, brutality combos are harder to do than
fatalities. Oh yeah, for sure. Brutality combos are way harder than fatalities. So it's like, there's never a moment where brutalities are dull, but there reaches a point where fatalities get a little bit stale because it's the same 2 animations every time in that one set environment. But brutalities you can do whenever you want, and it's always hype.
Quit-alities need to come back.
Yes, I was just about to ask that. I was just about Quit-alities.
Quit-alities need to be back, and they need to be harakiris, and they need to be so embarrassing.
Yes, there need to be more of them, because what's funny? Because I've been doing combos, and sometimes you combo into a Quit-ality, and that's almost super hype as well.
They quit at the right time.
At the right time.
I'll never forget some dude quit on my Kano back in the day when I was playing Kano for the first time. And in the fashion he quit, something to do with the way the blood flew out and the physics took place, it literally made a perfect tick, a giant, a Nike tick. So it was almost approving of the quit.
Nice.
So funny.
Yeah.
Oh man, I want a new MK.
Yeah.
Talking about all this stuff is making me really miss Mortal Kombat.
Right? And then and these games are so good. You could still go back to them and I do all the time. And sometimes if I don't know what to stream, I'm like, I'm just going to go back to MK. And I go back and I have a blast. And it's just a lot of fun every time I do.
It's just a very
Yeah.
reliable franchise.
Yeah.
Really. You know, if you like what it has to offer and you have the means to play them, it never hurts to go back. You know, we can jump on MK9 on PC, MKX or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be streaming a playthrough of Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monk soon. I went to town today and some second-hand game store and just picked up a PS2 and a couple of controllers and a memory card.
Nice.
Just to play Shaolin Monks again.
Yeah, no, that one is...
I really miss playing it.
Oh man, it's just so like me and Steve used to play it all the time. Like when it first came out, and we just loved. I mean, it was such a blast. We'd like see how many, like how big can we get this combo just by I juggle them, pass them to you. You do the air combo, you pass them back to me, and then pass them back until they finally explode. But man, that was such a good thing. And I've been hearing talks that even that studio has been doing something. So. We'll see. So, and I hope it goes to the next one. And like, man, it'd be so good. But Quit-alities, yes. And they gotta, I think they're gonna expand on them because man, they're so good. It's just and you think about it, of all these other fighting games right now, when you get a rage quit, it's just like, oh, you're so kind of like bummed out. Like, that was happening a lot in Dragon Ball, and you're like
on this exact talking point, right? On this exact topic. I was playing Dragon Ball the other day, right? And I was streaming it because I can stream console now, which is nice. I've got 2 monitors. I've got set a capture card, so I have the means to stream. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna play some Dragon Ball on PS4. I had like no joke about 20 rage quitters in a 4-hour session. Like 20 individual people that like left and quit while I was playing, and it was so lackluster because each individual opportunity, the dude quit. Yeah. And all I get is some crappy box come up and say, the connection has been lost.
Yes.
That happens in MKX, their head explodes, the game takes the mick out of them,
yeah.
And you're like, ha.
And your character celebrates?
Exactly. And it always says flawless victory. It's like flawless victory, Quit-ality. And it counts towards a flawless.
Yep.
Like, when someone quits on you in MKX and they get a Quit-ality, you don't get pissed because you find it funny.
Yeah.
You watch them embarrass themselves.
Yes.
In other fighting games we play, it's just like connection has been lost. And you think it's a bittersweet kind of really dull, boring way to end.
Yeah. Oh. No, they're like, no, they quit, they lose. Oh man. Yeah, that
deserves punishment.
Yeah. I remember I was on my way to work watching the stream when they announced Quit-alities. Like, hey, we're going to announce a new kind of ality. And I'm like, and I'm watching on my phone, walking to work. And when they were showing off and they showed off Quit-ality, I literally laughed as loud as I can. Like, just a natural, like people were staring at me because I had my headphones and I'm just looking at my phone because I was laughing so hard at the new ality, the Quit-ality. I'm like, oh my God, this is the best ever.
I think it just caught everyone off guard, really.
Yeah.
They were teasing like a brand new ality never seen before, and us being all really unoriginal and uncreative were like, oh, I wonder what it's going to be, and all these terrible suggestions, and it ends up being something that literally no one predicted.
No one.
It was so good.
It was fantastic. It was, so good, and it's such a good thing, man. And it's funny because Injustice, I'm like, I wish there would have been something, but I guess it's a Mortal Kombat thing.
I guess they just wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
I've kind of always naively wished the Brutalities or something like it were in Injustice 2, but I guess it just wouldn't really make sense.
Yeah. No, alright.
I mean, Injustice, right? Like, every character has to, they get defeated. It's not like MK where they just fall over and they never get back up. In Injustice 2, characters are, quote-unquote, defeated. They're never KO'd. They just stop fighting. So how are you going to do that, with Brutalities? If it's hard enough to see DC characters, ever just straight up lose without having their kind of preset collapsing animations, I can't imagine Brutalities were ever really on the cards or anything like it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'll probably go, well, maybe just one or two more questions. This one's going to be kind of tough because whenever you talk about not having a person's character in the next game, then the people are like, I'm angry. But I think out of this generation, out of the X cast, someone moving on to MK11, that probably, if they were out of the game. For me, Jackie Briggs is a really fun character to play as. Really, it's and really good to see at high level. But just something about her design, and if either it would be okay if she didn't make it, or if she got an overhaul on her design. I think maybe Jackie Briggs, like, if you look at her concept art, it's stunning, it's amazing. But when she came out, she was a little too much like her father. So if she doesn't make it to MK, I really like Takeda. I like Cassie. Kung Jin is in the middle for me. Ferritor, I know he for sure he's not crossing over. But I do like a Grappler. I do hope he's replaced with a Grappler. Like, any thoughts for you guys?
I think of all the new characters, I'd like to see Kotal Khan come back.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure we're going to see Ferritor. I think Ferritor could definitely be replaced by like a Moloch, I think, in my opinion. Of all the new characters, I like Takeda. I like Kung Jin. Yeah. In fact, I quite like all the new characters. Cassie and Jackie don't really interest me because they're not my kind of characters, but I'd understand if they were back in. I'd rather have Cassie over Jackie, though, personally. I think Jackie fit the variation system of MKX in particular.
Yeah.
The 3 arm types. I don't know how that would work in future games, whether they would just take the one they like the most and give that to her, you know? So maybe she'll have shotgun permanently or something like that.
I think it depends on whether these characters are supported by their similar counterparts, really. I think if we see Jackie and Cassie come back and Takeda, then does this mean they have to have... Because I think a big part of it was like, it wasn't just Cassie, it was Johnny Cage, it was Sonya Blade. It wasn't just Jackie, you know, Jax was there too. You had Takeda and Kenshi. Like, it was the families of all these characters were all in the game as well. And I think there are so many strong characters that I would like to see some of those characters maybe not make the cut in favor of other returning ones. I think if we're going to have Cassie, maybe that means there's not going to be Sonya. You know, if there's... it's hard to say. I don't want to say Jackie instead of Jax, because if it's a choice of the two, I would personally rather have Jax.
Yep.
I could definitely get behind having Takeda instead of Kenshi, for example. I think Takeda's a bit more interesting in the long term.
I personally disagree. I think Kenshi's a better character, but I think she has had his spot in the limelight where I think he could step out and Takeda could overtake, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So shall we do like perhaps one more question, then wrap things up?
For sure. No, time is definitely going by fast. And but let's see.
Enjoy talking about Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. And I mean,
fun
this is
times.
And let's say so we did that. I mean, the characters that would. I mean, my thing is I have a crazy time travel theory of this whole next game. I think that's, I don't know, I got that vibe, or because when they showed some images of, or something where if we get to story mode, I just want to see more of the back lore of MK. I think we've got a good, like, we'll just do a wish, like a MK wish for 11, and I think that'll be the last question. And like for me, I think time travel. Like I really want to see the great Kung Lao from lore that we've always heard, and I think maybe that we'll get that. Like, because if you go back into MKX, you get into the room with the paintings and stuff like that, and you see some of the past combatants and the first Grandmaster. I'd like to see maybe in the story, like, you know, like how some movies do, like prologue 500 years ago, and you see like maybe that first tournament where Kung Lao lost against Goro, and you play it or something like that. So I'm hoping for crazy, maybe some kind of really big time travel where we can get characters maybe like Kitana and Liu Kang's child. And then maybe go back to and visit like some of the early lore that we never really got to see in MK. I'd say that's be my crazy big MK wish. How about for you guys?
Think, in terms of lore, I don't really have too many.
Well, then you can maybe make it about like, oh, tournament level or gameplay or something like that. I think just I have a lore wish, so you could be like, oh, I really wish.
No worries. I think. I'm not going to wish for anything kind of competitively speaking, because I think it's a little bit too early.
Yeah, of course.
We'll kind of cross that bridge as a community when it comes, right? When we see what the game's like, because obviously competitive wishes mean nothing unless we know what the game actually looks like. You know, for all we know, maybe it'll be a legacy game and it'll play like MKX. Maybe it'll be completely brand new, you know, like MKX was from MK9. There's no way of knowing, so there's not as much point talking about it, I suppose, at the moment. However, I think the biggest thing I'd love is like a feature within the game is like a Shaolin Monk style story mode. Because I would love this kind of like co-op adventure based kind of potential thing. as the story mode of the game, because I love the story modes of the game, but I am a little bit growing a little bit tired of the formula. I think it would be nice to have something shaken up a little bit. And I think Shaolin Monk style adventure mode would be so good for that.
I think my wish for the next Mortal Kombat is that we go full into the 3D era world, where it's a bunch of different realms that you get to explore or at least see fleshed out. I'd love to see 3D characters make their return, see Onaga come back. Like, ultimately, what my wish for MK11 is I say MK11 like, you know, we always assume that's next, right?
Well, the next chapter,
the next chapter of Mortal Kombat, I want it to be the 3D chapter, because there is so much potential there that would be. It really is it's a new blank canvas. Yeah. But there's a bunch of sick source material that they can reimagine and make even better than it was before. So I'd love it to be, you know, the reimagining of the 3D world, because there's so much going on there that could be done super well in, you know, next year or whenever the next one would come out.
Yeah, well, cool. It's super awesome. I mean, I agree. I mean, they can do it well with their new, you know, powerhouse studio that they are now. So yeah, awesome.
Hell yeah.
All right, guys. I want to thank you guys. I don't know. I said I always had you guys in mind, because when I think of Mortal Kombat, you know, definitely think of you guys, because, and we'll get to make sure everyone gets to find out where your content is, because you guys have a great way of welcoming people who just come in from the very beginning to people who are like, I want to, you know, be at Evo, and I think that's why I'm like, that's why I have to have these guys, and especially, you know, with commentating, you know, you guys are in every aspect of the community. So I'm like, I have to get, you know, Ketchup and Mustard in this, and this discussion, because, like I said, if and make sure you let everyone know where they can find your YouTube and Twitch and Twitter, because you guys have the best, I think, in my opinion, but like now they have Rio and the other content creators are coming up, but like, I just picked up Mortal Kombat today, I want to learn, or I'm going to be at Evo next week, and they definitely have to come down to you guys. So I mean, if you guys want to,
thank you very much, man. We do appreciate that a lot, and it has been a lot of fun. You know, obviously we've been following you and the Yo Video Games guys for a while as well, so it's been nice to almost like kind of come together and then have this enjoyable discussion, you know, about what is hopefully going to be a really good experience. Obviously E3 is right around the corner, fingers crossed.
Yes,
MK is what we get revealed, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with it. Obviously, thanks very much for the shout outs, that does mean a lot to us. And if you ever wanted us to do this kind of thing again in the future, just
for sure, man, maybe we'll go back, we'll have a quick little discussion if it does happen at E3, and like, you know, just like from what we saw, like if we do get this trailer and we do find out a lot, because I'm gonna be like you guys, I'm gonna have a notepad if it's back there, and just, you know, soak in as much as possible, and then maybe like, hey, you know what, this is what happened, look at this, see, we talked about that. So I think once it does get announced, we can come back and have another like second discussion.
Basically, just it's pretty much echoing what Jake said, to be completely honest. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking about Mortal Kombat, especially seeing as the three of us are, you know, even outside of competitive and content and everything else, you know, it's safe to say we're all massive Mortal Kombat fanboys, which is great, because there's so much to go with, you know, and there is so much excitement. Even talking about the possibility of a new Mortal Kombat, it reinvigorates my passion for the franchise, for fighting games, for content, for commentary. Even the idea that there could be another Mortal Kombat, it literally just makes me prepared to just jump straight back into the fray. You know, when this game comes out, we're going to be straight back on the content grind. Oh yeah. You know, we're going to go in for the tutorials. We're going to do breakdowns of every single character, because it's like, this is our game, right? This is the game that put us on the map, and we have every intention of picking up where we left off, for sure.
Fantastic. So then you have to make sure to check out, and it's P&D Mustard on Twitter, and then P&D Ketchup on Twitter as well. And then how about Twitch and YouTube?
Yeah, the YouTube is sorry, I may as well take the reins on this one, Jake. But the YouTube's PND KNM, and the Twitch is PND Ketchup. The only reason we haven't changed the name of the Twitch is because it's very complicated, and to change the name, you actually lose a lot of the back end stuff. So the Twitch is basically always gonna be PND Ketchup. It's gonna be a joint venture. It's just named differently, basically.
Nice. Fantastic. All right, guys. Again, thank you so much. It was awesome. Yeah, I look forward to the next one. Hopefully, when this game does get announced, fingers crossed, if it follows the timeline. But thank you guys again.
No, it's been a pleasure, dude. Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. All right, chat. Thank you. Peace.